The iron shackles bit into Stella's wrists as two guards hauled her through the mud toward the ancient stone platform at the heart of the Pack's execution grounds. Rain poured from a bruised sky, turning the earth to slick black muck that sucked at her bare feet with each stumbling step. Her thin prison dress clung to her body, offering no protection from the cold or from the hundreds of eyes that watched her approach. "Traitor!" someone screamed from the crowd. "She killed him! She killed the Alpha's son!" Stella's chest constricted, her breath coming in sharp, painful gasps. She wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that she hadn't touched Adrian, that she'd found him already dying in the forest, with those strange symbols carved into the trees around him. But the gag in her mouth prevented even that small mercy. All she could do was shake her head desperately as the guards dragged her closer to the platform where the execution post stood. Dark wood stained with the blood of those who had been condemned before her. The Moonstone Pack had gathered in full force despite the weather. Wolves stood shoulder to shoulder in human form, their eyes glowing with rage and grief for their fallen prince. Adrian had been beloved, the golden son who would have inherited the Alpha title from his father. And Stella, a lowly Omega who worked in the Pack kitchens, had been found kneeling beside his corpse with his blood on her hands. She hadn't killed him. She knew she hadn't, but evidence didn't matter when grief demanded a scapegoat. The guards threw her onto the platform with enough force that she crashed to her knees, her head cracking against the wet stone. Stars exploded across her vision. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard boots approaching with measured, deliberate steps that made her heart seize with terror, and something else. Something she'd spent 3 years trying to bury. Alpha Bruce Thornfield emerged from the crowd like a storm given form. He was massive, even for an alpha wolf, standing well over 6.5 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sky. His dark hair was plastered to his skull by the rain, emphasizing the harsh angles of his face, the strong jaw that could shift into deadly fangs in seconds, the steel-gray eyes that had haunted Stella's dreams since the day she'd arrived at Moonstone territory as a refugee from a destroyed Pack. He'd never noticed her. Why would he? She was nobody. An Omega who kept her eyes down and her mouth shut, who served meals and scrubbed floors and made herself as invisible as possible. But she'd noticed him. God help her, she'd noticed everything about him. The way he moved with lethal grace, the deep rumble of his voice when he gave commands, the rare moments when his stern expression softened into something almost gentle. And now he was here to watch her die. Bruce stopped 3 feet from where she knelt, water streaming from his black leather jacket. His eyes raked over her with an expression she couldn't read, something harder and colder than she'd ever seen him wear before. Behind him stood his beta, Cole, and his gamma, Finn, both watching her with barely restrained violence. "Remove the gag," Bruce ordered. One of the guards stepped forward and yanked the cloth from her mouth with enough force that Stella tasted blood. She gasped for air, her lungs burning, her whole body shaking from cold and fear and the desperate need to speak, to defend herself, to make them understand. "I didn't kill him," she choked out. "Alpha, please, I didn't. Adrian was already dead when I found him. I swear on the moon goddess, I swear on my life." "Your life is already forfeit," Bruce cut her off, his voice like a blade through her words. "You were found with my nephew's blood on your hands, with his heart's blood still warm on your skin. The evidence speaks for itself." "Someone set me up!" Stella's voice cracked, desperation clawing at her throat. "I know how it looks. But I'm not a killer. I couldn't. Please. There were symbols carved into the trees. Ancient markings I'd never seen before. Someone else did this. Someone who knew how to make it look like enough! A woman's voice shrieked from the crowd, and Stella's blood turned to ice. Meredith Ashford pushed through the gathered wolves with the authority of someone who believed the world bent to her will. She was beautiful in the way winter was beautiful, sharp and cold and deadly. Her platinum hair was pulled back in an elegant twist that somehow remained perfect despite the rain, and her designer clothes marked her as someone who'd never scrubbed a floor or served a meal in her life. She was the daughter of the alpha of the neighboring Silvercrest Pack, and she'd been engaged to Adrian since they were children. Meredith's green eyes blazed with hatred as she climbed onto the platform. She took everything from me. She murdered the man I loved, the future I was promised. Her voice rose to a shriek. She's a wolfless Omega who came here with nothing, and she repaid our pack's kindness by killing our prince. Execute her now! The crowd roared their agreement, a wall of sound that made Stella flinch. She saw faces she'd served breakfast to, wolves she'd cleaned for, people she'd smiled at in passing, all of them screaming for her blood. I didn't kill him, Stella repeated, but her voice was too small, too weak against the tide of their rage. I would never. I couldn't. Bruce raised his hand and silence fell instantly, absolute and complete. The power in that simple gesture made something twist deep in Stella's chest, a recognition she didn't want to name. He studied her with those storm cloud eyes, and she couldn't tell what he was thinking, couldn't read anything in that impassive face. Did you find my nephew's body in the eastern forest at the old border markers? Yes. Were you alone when you found him? Yes. Was there anyone else present who can verify your story about these symbols? Stella's heart sank. No, but they were there, carved deep into the oak trees. Ancient wolf script, the kind that hasn't been used in centuries. I don't even know how to read it, but I know it was important. I know it meant something. Convenient, Bruce interrupted. A story with no witnesses, symbols that have conveniently disappeared, as my scouts found no such markings when they searched the site. They were there! Someone must have removed them, must have hidden the evidence because they knew it would prove my innocence. Or, Meredith interjected with a cruel smile, you're a desperate Omega trying to save her worthless life with fairy tales about ancient magic. She turned to Bruce. Alpha Bruce, I speak for Silvercrest Pack when I demand justice for my betrothed. End this. Execute the traitor. The crowd roared again, a tsunami of bloodlust that crashed over Stella and threatened to drown her. She looked at Bruce, searching his face for any hint of doubt, any flicker of mercy. But there was nothing, just cold stone where warmth should have been. He couldn't feel it, she realized with crushing despair. The bond that had haunted her for 3 years, the connection that pulled at her every time he was near, the recognition that had branded itself into her soul the first time their eyes met across the dining hall. He felt none of it. To him, she was just another Omega, just another face in the crowd, just a killer who needed to be punished. The mate bond was supposed to be mutual, instant, undeniable. But Stella had learned the hard way that fate was cruel. She'd been blessed with a mate who would never know she existed, and cursed to love him from afar until the day she died, which, apparently, was today. Stella Morrison, Bruce's voice rang out across the execution grounds. You have been found guilty of murdering Prince Adrian Thornfield, heir to the Moonstone Pack. The sentence is death by beheading, to be carried out immediately. He paused, and something flickered in his eyes. Regret? Doubt? But it was gone before Stella could be sure. Do you have any final words? Stella's mind raced. She had seconds to make them understand, to find the words that would convince them she was telling the truth. But what could she say that she hadn't already said? What evidence could she offer when everything pointed to her guilt? Her eyes drifted past Bruce to the execution post behind him, then beyond that to the ground where she would kneel for the blade. The earth there looked different somehow, darker than the surrounding mud, with a texture that seemed almost to shimmer in the rain. It was ancient ground, she realized. This execution site had been used for hundreds of years, maybe longer. How much blood had soaked into that soil? How many innocent people had died here, condemned by evidence that lied? And suddenly, Stella remembered something her grandmother had told her when she was a child, before the attack that destroyed her birth pack and killed everyone she loved. Her grandmother had been the pack's history keeper, the guardian of old stories and older truths. The blood of the first wolves runs deep in our line, her grandmother had whispered, her wrinkled hand gentle on Stella's hair. When the time comes, when you stand on the bones of our ancestors, the old ones will know their own. They will rise for you, child. They will remember. Stella had thought it was just a story, a fairy tale to comfort a little girl who showed no signs of her wolf emerging. She'd remained wolfless through puberty, through her first shift age, through every milestone that should have awakened her inner beast. She'd learned to hide her shame, to accept that she would live and die as a human in a world of wolves. But her grandmother's words echoed in her mind now with the weight of prophecy. I didn't kill Adrian Thornfield, Stella said, and this time her voice didn't shake. She lifted her chin and looked Bruce straight in the eye, letting him see the truth in her face even if he couldn't feel it in his soul. I am innocent of this crime, and I call on the old ones to bear witness to this truth. I call on the blood that runs in my veins and the bones that sleep beneath this ground. Her voice rose, gaining strength and power she didn't know she possessed. I call on the first wolves to judge me and find me worthy or strike me down where I stand. Silence fell like a stone into still water. The crowd stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. Even Bruce looked, taken aback, his eyes widening slightly at her audacity. The first wolves are legend, he said finally. Children's stories told by the fire. There is no old magic left in this world, Omega. There is only justice. He gestured to the guards. Bring her to the post. The guards hauled Stella to her feet and began dragging her toward the execution post. Her bare feet slipped in the mud, and she stumbled, fighting to stay upright even though she knew it didn't matter. In seconds, she would be forced to her knees. The executioner would raise his silver blade, and her head would roll across the ancient stone, just another life sacrificed to pack justice. Please, someone cried from the crowd, and Stella's heart cracked when she recognized the voice. It was Margaret, one of the kitchen staff, an older wolf who'd shown Stella kindness when she first arrived. Please, she's just a girl. She's never hurt anyone. I've worked beside her for 3 years, and she wouldn't. She couldn't. Silence, Cole, the beta, snarled at Margaret. "Another word and you'll join her on the platform." Margaret's sobs cut off abruptly, but Stella could still hear them, muffled behind the woman's hand. It was more than anyone else had done for her, and it meant everything. The guards positioned Stella 3 feet from the post, right at the edge of where the ground darkened into that strange, shimmering earth. Up close, she could see it more clearly now. The soil wasn't just dark. It was black as obsidian, black as starless night, and it seemed to pulse with something she couldn't name. The rain that fell on it didn't make mud. It simply disappeared, absorbed into the earth like the ground itself was drinking it in. Stella's grandmother's voice echoed in her memory again, stronger now, more insistent. "The blood of the first wolves runs deep in our line." The executioner stepped forward, a massive wolf named Drake, who served as the pack's warrior trainer. He carried a silver blade the length of Stella's arm, its edge catching the light despite the gray sky. Silver was death to werewolves, burning through shifter healing like acid through flesh. One strike would be all it took. Drake's face was impassive as he took his position behind the post, but Stella saw his jaw tighten. He didn't like this either, she realized, but he would do his duty because that's what pack law demanded. "Kneel," Bruce commanded. Stella's legs trembled. This was it. The end of her short, insignificant life. She would die without ever knowing what it felt like to shift, to run on 4 legs beneath the full moon. She would die without ever hearing Bruce call her by name, with anything other than condemnation in his voice. She would die with the mate bond singing in her chest, a song only she could hear, forever unanswered. The guards pushed her forward, and Stella's foot touched the black earth. The world exploded. Power erupted from the ground beneath her feet like a volcano waking from centuries of sleep. It was ancient and vast and terrifying. A force so immense that Stella's knees buckled under the weight of it. But she didn't fall. She couldn't fall, because the power was holding her up, pouring into her body through the soles of her feet, filling her with electricity that set every nerve ending on fire. The black earth began to crack. Fissures spread outward from where Stella stood, racing across the platform in patterns that looked almost like ancient wolf script, the same symbols she'd seen carved into the trees around Adrian's body. Light poured from the cracks, not the warm gold of firelight, but the cold silver of moonlight, bright enough to turn the gray day white. "What?" someone started to say, but their voice was drowned out by a sound that made Stella's blood freeze and boil at the same time. Howling, coming from beneath the earth, from somewhere deep below the execution grounds. Wolves were howling. But these weren't normal wolf howls. These were ancient, powerful, layered with harmonies that suggested dozens of voices singing in unison. The sound resonated in Stella's bones, in her chest, in her soul, waking something that had slept there all her life. The crowd scattered, wolves fleeing in terror from the platform. Even the guards released Stella and stumbled backward, their faces white with shock. Only Bruce remained close, and Stella saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before: uncertainty. The cracks in the earth widened, and from them rose wolves. But not living wolves. These were spirits, transparent and shimmering, their forms outlined in that cold silver light. They were massive, even larger than alpha wolves, with ancient intelligence in their eyes and power radiating from their spectral bodies like heat from a forge. One by one, they climbed from the cracks in the earth, summoned by Stella's call, drawn by the blood in her veins. Stella couldn't breathe. She counted 6 spirits, then 8, then 12, and still more came, forming a circle around her on the platform. They moved like liquid moonlight, beautiful and terrible. And when they turned their eyes to her, she felt recognition crash through her like a wave. The blood of the first wolves runs deep in our line. The primeval pack, she whispered, and knew it was true. You're the first wolves, the ones who walked before packs, before territories, before the world was divided. Her voice grew stronger. You're my ancestors! The largest of the spirit wolves stepped forward, a massive beast with silver-white fur and eyes that held the wisdom of ages. When it spoke, its voice resonated not in the air, but directly in Stella's mind, in the minds of everyone present on the execution grounds. Stella Blackmore of the First Blood, daughter of the ancient line, last keeper of the old ways. The wolf's presence was overwhelming, pressing against Stella's consciousness like a mountain. You have been wronged. You have been condemned without truth. You have called us to bear witness, and we answer. The spirit wolf turned its massive head toward Bruce, and the alpha actually took a step back, his face gone pale. Alpha of the Moonstone, you stand on sacred ground. You would shed innocent blood on the bones of our children. The old laws demand truth before judgment, demand proof before execution. You have failed these laws. We found her with the body. The evidence can be manufactured. Truth cannot. The spirit wolf's eyes blazed brighter. Stella Blackmore did not kill your nephew. She is innocent of the crime for which you condemn her. The true killer walks among you still, wearing innocence like a mask. A murmur rippled through the crowd, fear mixing with confusion and dawning horror. Then who? Bruce's voice cracked like a whip. If she didn't kill Adrian, who did? Show me! The spirit wolves moved as one, their spectral forms flowing across the platform toward one specific person in the crowd, toward Meredith Ashford. The Silvercrest Alpha's daughter went rigid, her face draining of color as 12 ancient wolves surrounded her. She tried to step back, but the spirits blocked her path, hemming her in with their glowing bodies. No! Meredith shrieked. Get away from me! I wouldn't! This is a trick! The Omega is using dark magic to save herself! No magic can deceive the first wolves. The largest spirit stepped so close to Meredith that its snout almost touched her face. We see what you hide. We know what you've done. Speak your truth, or we will speak it for you. I have nothing to confess. But Meredith's voice was too high, too sharp, and her eyes darted around wildly, looking for escape. Very well. The spirit wolf's presence intensified, and suddenly Stella could see what it was showing her. Images projected directly into her mind. Meredith in the eastern forest, moving through the trees at night. Adrian meeting her at the border markers, concern on his face. Their argument, his shock when she pulled out a silver blade. His pleas for mercy cut short as she struck him down, as she carved ancient symbols into the trees around his body, symbols she'd copied from forbidden texts, symbols meant to summon old magic and obscure her crime. And then the final, damning image. Meredith watching from the shadows as Stella stumbled upon Adrian's body. Watching as the Omega knelt beside him and tried desperately to save him. Watching as Stella's hands became coated in his blood. Meredith had waited, hidden, for the other wolves to arrive and find Stella there, the perfect scapegoat for a perfect crime. Gasps erupted from the crowd as they saw the same visions, the truth laid bare by ancient power that couldn't be lied to or deceived. "You killed your own betrothed!" someone shouted. "She framed an innocent girl!" "Why?" Bruce's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, and his eyes, when they fixed on Meredith, held a fury that made her flinch. "Adrian loved you. He was faithful to you. Why would you murder him?" For a long moment, Meredith said nothing, her body rigid and her face twisted with an emotion Stella couldn't identify. Then, suddenly, she laughed. A high, broken sound that made the hair on the back of Stella's neck stand up. "Loved me?" Meredith spat the words like poison. "He loved his duty. He loved the idea of a political alliance between our packs. But me? The real me?" She laughed again, the sound scraping across raw nerves. "He was going to break our engagement. He came to the border that night to tell me he'd found his true mate, and he wanted to be free to claim her." Stella's heart clenched. Adrian had found his mate? And he'd been willing to defy pack politics, to break a decades-old engagement, to follow his heart? That didn't sound like the arrogant prince she'd heard about in kitchen gossip. It sounded like someone brave. "He never told me," Bruce said, and there was grief in his voice now, raw and bleeding. "He never said." "Of course he didn't tell you." He was going to tell everyone at the full moon gathering. Make a big romantic announcement. Meredith's lip curled. "He thought I would understand. Thought I would step aside gracefully because we were never really in love anyway. But he was wrong. I didn't care about love. I cared about power. About being Luna of Moonstone Pack. About the alliance between Silvercrest and Moonstone, about everything I'd been promised since I was 6 years old." Her voice rose to a shriek. "So I killed him! I killed him and framed that pathetic Omega. And it would have worked if she hadn't somehow called up these damned spirits." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the rain seemed to pause, holding its breath. Then, Bruce moved, and his speed was terrifying. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next he had Meredith by the throat, lifted off the ground, his eyes blazing with gold as his wolf surged just beneath his skin. "You murdered my nephew," he growled, and his voice was barely human. "You killed a prince of Moonstone. You condemned an innocent to death. You violated every law of pack and honor." His hand tightened, and Meredith choked, her face going purple. "The sentence is death, but not the quick death of the blade. You will be given to the families of those you've wronged. They will decide your fate." He threw her to the ground at the feet of Cole and Finn, who grabbed her arms with grips like iron manacles. Meredith tried to scream, but Cole clamped a hand over her mouth, muffling her pleas. "Take her to the cells," Bruce ordered. "She'll face pack justice at moonrise." As the Beta and Gamma dragged Meredith away, Bruce turned slowly to face Stella. The ancient wolves still surrounded her, their spectral forms casting silver light across the platform. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Moonstone territory 3 years ago, Stella saw Bruce really look at her. Not through her, not past her, but at her, seeing her, recognizing her, his eyes widening with something that looked like shock. "You're innocent." It wasn't a question, but his voice held disbelief, as if he couldn't quite reconcile what he'd just witnessed with what he'd believed. "All this time, you were innocent, and I—" He stopped, his jaw working as if the words were stuck in his throat. "She is more than innocent." The largest spirit wolf moved between them, its massive form blocking Stella from Bruce's view. "She is first blood, last of the ancient line, keeper of the old ways." The wolf's eyes bore into Bruce with an intensity that made the alpha drop his gaze. "She carries our legacy in her veins, our power in her bones. She has lived among you as an omega, wolfless and weak, because the first blood sleeps until it is called. But now she has awakened us. Now she has claimed her birthright." The spirit wolf turned back to Stella, and its presence in her mind was gentle now, almost tender. "Stella Blackmore, do you accept what you are? Do you claim the power of your ancestors?" Stella's throat was tight, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. All her life, she'd been nothing, less than nothing. An omega without a wolf, a refugee without a pack, a servant without status. She'd learned to be small, to be invisible, to want nothing because wanting only led to pain. But the power flowing through her now, the connection she felt to these ancient spirits, the recognition in their eyes when they looked at her. It called to something deep in her soul, something that had always been there, waiting. "I accept," she whispered. Then louder, "I claim my birthright. I am Stella Blackmore, first blood, daughter of the ancient line, and I am no one's victim." The spirit wolves howled, a sound of triumph and joy that shook the earth. And then they moved forward as one, their spectral forms flowing into Stella's body like water into a vessel. She gasped as power flooded her. Centuries of accumulated strength, knowledge, skill, all the gifts of the first wolves pouring into her in a torrent that threatened to split her skin. Her bones shifted, her muscles tore and reformed. Every cell in her body was rewriting itself, awakening the dormant bloodline that had slept for 23 years. Pain lanced through her, sharp and brutal, but there was euphoria underneath it, a rightness that made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. And then, with a sound like thunder, Stella's wolf emerged. It wasn't a shift, not the way normal wolves shifted. This was pure transformation, reality bending to accommodate the impossible. One moment Stella stood on 2 legs, the next she stood on 4. And her wolf was magnificent. She was huge, nearly as large as an alpha, with fur the color of moonlight on snow, pure white with an ethereal glow that made her look almost translucent. Her eyes were silver, not the gold of normal wolves, and they held the same ancient intelligence she'd seen in the spirits. Power radiated from her in waves, making the air shimmer and the ground beneath her paws hum with energy. The crowd had gone silent, every wolf staring at her in awe and fear. Stella threw back her head and howled, and her voice carried the harmonies of the first wolves, the sound of the primeval pack singing through her. It was the most beautiful and terrifying sound any of them had ever heard. When she finished, she shifted back to human form, another impossible thing, as normal wolves needed time and concentration to shift. But Stella wasn't normal anymore. She was first blood, and the rules that govern common wolves no longer applied to her. She stood naked on the platform, but she didn't feel vulnerable. The power of the first wolves hummed beneath her skin, and she knew instinctively that she could clothe herself if she wished, could manipulate the air and light to create garments from nothing. But first, she needed to address the wolf staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. Bruce hadn't moved. He stood frozen, his eyes locked on Stella, his chest rising and falling rapidly as if he'd just run a mile. And there was something in his expression now, something raw and desperate and almost painful to see. "How long?" His voice was barely a whisper. "How long have you been here? At Moonstone?" Stella's newly awakened wolf stirred inside her, recognizing something in his tone, in the way his body tensed as if preparing for a blow. 3 years. I came after my pack was destroyed by rogues. I was 15, the only survivor. 3 years. He said it like a curse. 3 years you've been here, and I didn't. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Goddess, I didn't even know your name until today. The confession hit Stella harder than she'd expected. She'd known he didn't notice her, had accepted it as fact. But hearing him admit it, hearing the pain in his voice as if it hurt him, that was new. That was confusing. You're an alpha. I was an omega working in the kitchens. There was no reason for you to know me. There was every reason. Bruce took a step toward her, then another, his eyes blazing with emotion she couldn't name. Do you know what you are to me? Do you have any idea? Stella's heart began to pound. What? My mate. The word fell between them like a stone into still water, ripples spreading outward. You're my mate, Stella. You've been my mate since the day you arrived at Moonstone, and I was too blind to see it. Too caught up in pack politics and alpha duties to notice the bond calling to me, pulling me toward the kitchens at odd hours, making me restless and irritable when I couldn't figure out why. He laughed, a bitter sound. I thought I was going mad. Thought there was something wrong with me because I couldn't focus, couldn't settle, kept catching a scent that drove my wolf insane with need, but never could track it to its source. You felt it? Stella could barely breathe. This whole time, you felt the bond? Not clearly enough. Not strongly enough to recognize what it was. And by the time I started to suspect, started to piece it together. He gestured helplessly at the execution grounds around them. I almost killed you. I stood here, ready to watch you die, and I didn't know. Didn't know you were innocent. Didn't know you were first blood. Didn't know you were mine. His voice cracked on the last word. Stella felt tears streak down her face, hot against her cold skin. The mate bond she'd carried alone for 3 years suddenly blazed to life between them, no longer one-sided, but mutual, shared, acknowledged. It was overwhelming, a connection so deep and primal that it threatened to consume her. She could feel Bruce's emotions now, his guilt, his rage, his desperate need to make this right, and underneath it all, a love so fierce it took her breath away. I thought you didn't want me, she whispered. I thought the bond was one-sided. That fate had cursed me with a mate who would never see me. Never. Bruce closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with his size and strength. I see you now, Stella. I see you, and I am never looking away again. Never. His thumbs brushed away her tears. You are mine, my mate, my equal, my Luna. And anyone who tries to harm you, who even looks at you wrong, will answer to me and my wolf. The possessive claim in his words should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like coming home. Stella's wolf purred in satisfaction, recognizing her mate's wolf, the other half of her soul. But there was still too much unsaid, too much damage that couldn't be erased with pretty words and mate bond recognition. You were going to execute me. The words came out small, broken. You looked at me like I was nothing, like I deserved to die. You didn't even question the evidence, didn't give me a chance to prove my innocence. Bruce flinched as if she'd struck him, and guilt flooded through the bond so intensely that Stella gasped. I know. God, Stella, I know. He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath shuddering. I failed you. I failed as an alpha, as a mate, as a wolf. Adrian was my nephew, my brother's son. I raised him after my brother died. And when I found him dead, when I saw you with his blood on your hands, his voice broke. I wanted someone to blame. I wanted justice so badly that I didn't stop to question if I was executing the right wolf. And that's unforgivable. What I almost did to you is unforgivable. But you didn't do it. Stella pulled back enough to look into his eyes, seeing the genuine remorse there, the self-hatred that mirrored her own pain. The first wolves stopped you, and now you know the truth. The truth is that you deserve better than me. Better than an alpha who almost killed his own mate because he was too blinded by grief to see clearly. His hands tightened on her face. But I'm selfish enough to want you anyway. Selfish enough to beg you to give me a chance to make this right. To prove that I can be the mate you deserve. The bond thrummed between them, singing with possibility. Stella could feel Bruce's sincerity, could sense that his words came from the deepest part of his soul. But trust wasn't built on feelings alone. It required action, proof, time. I don't know if I can trust you yet, she said honestly, and felt his pain spike through the bond. You were ready to watch me die, Bruce. That's not something I can just forget or forgive in a moment. I know, and I won't push you. I won't force anything. His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. But I will spend every day proving to you that I see you now, that I value you, that I will protect you, that you are the most important thing in my world. He released her face and took a step back, giving her space. You are first blood, Stella Blackmore. You don't need a pack or an alpha. You could leave Moonstone right now and no one could stop you. Your power exceeds mine. Your bloodline is older than any pack in existence. You owe us nothing. But if you choose to stay, if you give me the chance to earn your trust, his voice dropped to a whisper, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. Stella's wolf paced inside her mind, agitated and conflicted. Part of her wanted to run, to leave this place where she'd been condemned and humiliated, where she'd almost lost everything. But another part of her, the part that had loved Bruce from afar for 3 years, the part that recognized him as home, wanted to stay. Wanted to give him that chance. And there was something else to consider now. With her power awakened, with the legacy of the first wolves flowing through her veins, She wasn't the same wolf who'd been dragged to the execution grounds in chains. She was stronger now, powerful enough to protect herself, to demand respect, to stand as an equal rather than a servant. "If I stay," she said slowly, watching his face, "things will be different. I'm not the Omega who scrubbed your floors and kept her head down. I'm first blood. I will be treated as such." "Absolutely." There was no hesitation in his voice. "You will be honored as first blood, respected as Luna, cherished as my mate. I will announce it to every pack in the region. You will want for nothing." "And Meredith?" Stella's eyes hardened. "What happens to the woman who murdered Adrian and tried to have me killed?" Bruce's expression went glacial, his alpha power radiating outward in waves that made the remaining wolves in the crowd drop their eyes. "Pack justice. At moonrise, she will be given to Adrian's mother, my sister-in-law, who has the right to determine her fate as the closest living relative of the victim. But I can tell you what Sarah will choose." His eyes glowed gold. "Death, slow and painful as befits a traitor and murderer. Meredith Ashford will not see another dawn." Savage satisfaction curled through Stella's chest, and she didn't try to suppress it. Justice mattered. Adrian deserved justice, and so did she. "I want to be there when sentence is passed." "As is your right." Bruce's eyes softened. "Anything you want, Stella. Anything you need. Just name it." What did she want? The question was harder than it should have been. For 3 years, she'd wanted nothing beyond survival, beyond making it through each day without drawing attention or angering anyone. But now she wanted everything. "I want respect. I want to be seen as more than the Omega who was falsely accused. I want a voice in pack decisions, especially those that affect the vulnerable members, the Omegas, the children, the wolves without family to protect them." Her voice gained strength as she spoke, the power of the first wolves lending weight to her words. "I want changes, Bruce. I want this pack to be better, to be fairer, to be the kind of place where what happened to me could never happen to anyone else." Done. There was pride in his voice now, admiration shining in his eyes. "You have my word as Alpha. Whatever reforms you want, whatever changes you believe necessary, we'll implement them. Together." He held out his hand to her. "If you'll let me stand beside you." Stella stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered and difficult to rebuild. But the mate bond hummed between them, and her wolf was practically clawing at her to close the distance, to touch him, to complete the connection that had been denied for so long. She thought about the first wolves who'd answered her call, about her grandmother's prophecy finally coming true, about the power now flowing through her veins. She thought about Adrian, dead before his time, and about all the other wolves who'd been failed by a system that prioritized political alliances over truth and justice. And she thought about Bruce, not the alpha who'd condemned her, but the mate who was looking at her now like she held his entire world in her hands. The wolf who'd felt the bond calling but hadn't understood it, who'd been drawn to her despite not knowing why, who was now offering her everything he had and asking only for the chance to prove himself. "I'll stay," Stella said, and watched relief crash over Bruce's face like a wave. "But I'm staying on my terms. I'm not the Omega you didn't notice. I'm your equal, Bruce, your partner. And if you ever treat me as less than that again, I will leave, and you will never find me. Never. He took her hand in his, and the connection between them blazed bright enough to make them both gasp. You are my equal, my better, in truth, and I will spend every moment proving that I understand that. Then we have an understanding. Bruce's thumb stroked over her knuckles, the simple touch sending electricity racing up her arm. Could I... He struggled with the words, then just said it in a rush. Can I hold you? Please? I've wanted to hold you for 3 years, even when I didn't understand why. And now that I know, now that you're here and safe and mine, I just need to hold you. Stella's resistance crumbled. She stepped forward into his arms, and Bruce wrapped her in an embrace that felt like coming home. He was warm and solid and strong, and he held her like she was precious, like she was everything. His scent surrounded her, pine and rain and something uniquely him, and her wolf purred in contentment. I've got you, Bruce murmured against her hair. I've got you, and I'm never letting go. Never again, Stella. You're safe. You're mine. You're home. And despite everything, the fear, the pain, the near-death experience, Stella felt something in her chest loosen and warm. Because she was home. Not the territory or the pack house, but here, in these arms, with this wolf. This was where she belonged. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other while the rain fell around them and the crowd watched in stunned silence. Then Bruce pulled back enough to look at her face, his eyes intense. I'm going to make a declaration, he said. Right here, right now, in front of the entire pack. I'm claiming you publicly as my mate, and I'm announcing your status as first blood. Anyone who disrespects you after this will answer to me personally. Trying to make up for almost having me executed? Trying to start making things right. His expression softened. And trying to tell the world that you're mine before some other alpha gets ideas. Despite herself, Stella laughed. It felt strange after everything that had happened, but also right. Like reclaiming a piece of herself she'd thought was lost. I don't think you need to worry about other alphas. I'm not taking any chances. He turned to face the crowd, keeping one arm wrapped protectively around Stella's waist. With a thought, she clothed herself in garments of light. A simple dress that shimmered like moonlight, modest but beautiful. Bruce's eyes widened when he saw what she'd done, then filled with awe. You're incredible, he murmured, before raising his voice to address the pack. Moonstone Pack! Hear your alpha! The wolves who'd scattered during the appearance of the first wolves crept back toward the execution grounds, drawn by the power in Bruce's voice and their curiosity about what would happen next. They stared at Stella with a mixture of fear and wonder, seeing her now as she truly was, rather than the invisible Omega she'd been before. Stella Blackmore has been proven innocent of all charges by the first wolves themselves. The true killer was Meredith Ashford, who confessed to murdering Prince Adrian and framing an innocent wolf. Meredith will face pack justice at moonrise. He paused, letting that sink in, watching the shock and shame ripple through the crowd. But that is not the most important thing I need to say today. Bruce turned to look at Stella, and the expression on his face was so full of love and reverence that her breath caught. Stella Blackmore is first blood, last of the ancient line, keeper of the old ways, Her power exceeds that of any alpha in existence, and her bloodline predates the formation of packs themselves. His voice rang out across the grounds. And she is my mate, my true mate, given to me by the moon goddess herself. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Margaret, the kitchen worker who defended Stella, burst into tears. Several other wolves dropped to their knees in respect. Whether for Stella's first blood status or for her new position as Luna, it was hard to say. From this moment forward, Stella Blackmore is Luna of Moonstone Pack. She will be treated with the respect and honor due to first blood and to my mate. Anyone who fails to show her proper respect will be banished from this territory. His eyes scanned the crowd, making sure everyone understood. This is not a request. This is pack law. And one more thing. Bruce took both of Stella's hands in his, turning to face her fully. I know I don't deserve you. I know I almost made the worst mistake of my life. But I'm asking you, in front of the pack, in front of the moon goddess, in front of everyone who matters, to give me the chance to be worthy of you. To let me stand beside you as your mate and your partner. He dropped to one knee, and Stella's heart stuttered in her chest. Stella Blackmore, first blood, keeper of my heart. Will you accept me as your mate? Will you let me mark you, claim you, bond with you for life? His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her. Will you forgive me and give me the chance to love you the way you deserve to be loved? Stella looked down at this powerful alpha kneeling before her, offering her everything, and felt tears stream down her face again. She thought about the Omega she'd been just hours ago, invisible, powerless, condemned to die. And she thought about the wolf she was now, first blood, powerful beyond measure, seen and valued and loved. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, complete. Yes! The word came out choked but clear. Yes! I accept you as my mate. I accept your mark and your claim. She pulled him to his feet, not wanting him to kneel to her. We're equals, Bruce. Partners. And we start this bond with honesty between us, with truth and trust we build together. Thank you. He pulled her close again, his face buried in her neck, right over her pulse point where a mate mark would go. Thank you, Stella. I swear on everything I am, you won't regret this. I know. And she did know. Through the mate bond, she could feel his sincerity, his love, his desperate determination to make things right. Trust would take time to fully rebuild, but they had that time now. They had forever. Can I mark you now? Please. My wolf is going insane wanting to complete the bond. Stella's own wolf was just as desperate, clawing at her to finish what they'd started. The marking would finalize their mate bond, would tie them together in a way that nothing could break. It was permanent, irreversible, forever. Yes, mark me, make me yours. Bruce's eyes flared gold as his wolf surged forward. He lowered his head to her neck, and Stella tilted her head to give him access, baring her throat in a gesture of trust that would have been unthinkable an hour ago. She felt his breath hot against her skin, felt his lips brush over her pulse point, and then felt the sharp pressure of his fangs sinking into her flesh. The pain was brief, immediately overwhelmed by pleasure so intense it nearly drove her to her knees. The mate bond, which had been incomplete for 3 years, snapped into place with a force that made the world tilt and blur. Suddenly she could feel everything Bruce felt: his love, his relief, his absolute devotion. She was inside his mind and he was inside hers, 2 souls merging into one while still remaining distinct. It was overwhelming and perfect and right. When Bruce pulled back, there was blood on his lips and a satisfied glow in his eyes. Stella touched her neck and felt the mark there. His claim, visible to every wolf who looked at her. She was marked, claimed, mated, and it felt amazing. "Mine," Bruce growled, pulling her close. "Finally. After 3 years of torture, you're finally mine." "Technically, I was always yours. You were just too blind to notice." "Don't remind me." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "I have years of neglect to make up for. I'm going to spoil you rotten, Stella. You're going to be so sick of my attention that you'll beg me for space." Somehow I doubt that. The crowd was cheering now, the earlier horror and shock giving way to celebration. A prince had been murdered and his killer exposed. An innocent had been saved. An alpha had found his mate. And the pack had witnessed the return of the first wolves, ancient power walking among them once more. Margaret pushed through the crowd with tears streaming down her face, and Stella opened her arms to the older woman who'd been the only one to defend her. "Thank you," Stella whispered as Margaret hugged her fiercely. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." "I knew you couldn't have done it. I just knew." Margaret pulled back and looked at Stella with wonder. First blood. All this time, we had first blood working in our kitchens, and we never knew. "I didn't know either." Stella squeezed the woman's hands. "But I know now. And things are going to change around here, Margaret. No more Omegas being treated as less than. No more wolves being invisible. Everyone matters. Everyone gets respect." "You mean it?" "I mean it. And as Luna, I'll make sure it happens." More wolves approached, some to apologize for believing she was guilty, others to congratulate her on the mate bond, still others just to get a closer look at the first blood who'd emerged from obscurity like a phoenix from ashes. Stella handled each interaction with grace, accepting apologies and offering forgiveness, though she noted who approached and who stayed away. She would remember those who'd screamed for her death, who'd been so quick to condemn without evidence. She would remember, and she would make sure they learned to be better. Bruce stayed at her side through it all, his hand at the small of her back or his arm around her waist, a constant, solid presence that anchored her. Through the bond, she could feel his pride in her, his wonder at having finally found her, his determination to protect her from anything that might threaten her again. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Bruce leaned close to whisper in her ear, "Come with me. There's something I want to show you before we deal with Meredith's sentencing." "What is it?" "You'll see." He led her away from the execution grounds, through the pack territory toward the Alpha house. But instead of going inside, he guided her around to the back where a garden bloomed in wild profusion. And there, in the center of the garden, stood a gazebo Stella had never noticed before, its white latticework covered in climbing roses. "I built this 3 years ago," Bruce said quietly, "right after you arrived at Moonstone. I didn't know why at the time, just felt this overwhelming urge to create something beautiful, something peaceful. I worked on it at night when I couldn't sleep, when I felt restless and didn't understand why. He turned to look at her. My wolf was calling to yours even then, even though I was too stupid to recognize it. And it led me to build this. For you. Stella's throat tightened as she looked at the gazebo, at the care and attention in every detail. 3 years he'd been drawn to her without knowing it, building her a sanctuary while she scrubbed floors and tried to be invisible. It's beautiful. It's yours. Everything I have is yours, Stella. This garden, this house, this pack, my heart. All of it belongs to you. He pulled her into the gazebo and sat on the bench, pulling her down beside him. I used to come here when pack politics became too much, when the weight of being alpha felt crushing. I'd sit here and feel peaceful, like I was waiting for something, though I didn't know what. He smiled. I was waiting for you. Stella leaned against him, letting his warmth seep into her bones. The mate bond hummed contentedly between them, and her wolf was purring so loudly she could almost hear it. What happens now? Now we handle Meredith's sentencing. Then we announce your status to the other packs and deal with whatever political fallout comes from that. Silvercrest won't be happy about their alpha's daughter being executed, but they'll have to accept it. He kissed the top of her head. And then we start building the pack you described. Fair, just, a place where every wolf matters. We do it together. Together. Stella tested the word, found she liked how it felt. I think I could get used to that. Good. Because you're stuck with me now, Luna. For better or worse, in this life and whatever comes after. His expression grew more serious. I know I can't erase what I almost did. Can't take back the fear and pain I caused you. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life making new memories with you. Better ones. Until the bad ones fade to nothing. They won't fade completely. What happened today changed me, Bruce. Made me stronger, but also more cautious. More aware of how quickly things can go wrong. She looked up at him. But I'm willing to move forward, to build something new with you. Because my wolf knows you're mine, and I'm learning to trust that again. That's all I can ask for. He cupped her face gently. Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't waste it. Stella smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I know you won't. As moonrise approached, they made their way to the pack house where Meredith's sentencing would take place. The mood was somber, the reality of what had happened settling over everyone like a shroud. Adrian's mother, Sarah, waited in the judgment hall with tears streaming down her face and murder in her eyes. The sentencing was brutal, but just. Meredith was stripped of her pack affiliation, declared rogue, and sentenced to death for her crimes. Sarah, as the victim's closest kin, carried out the sentence herself with a silver blade, and no one present felt anything but grim satisfaction as justice was served. It was over quickly. Meredith's body was burned, her ashes scattered to the wind with no ceremony or honor. She would not be remembered or mourned. She would simply cease to exist in pack memory, erased as if she'd never been. Afterward, Bruce held Sarah as she wept for her son, and Stella stood beside them, offering what comfort she could to a woman she barely knew. It was the right thing to do, the Luna thing to do. And when Sarah finally looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes, she saw something in the older woman's face that made her throat tight. Thank you, Sarah whispered. Thank you for calling the first wolves. Thank you for revealing the truth. Adrian deserved justice, and because of you, he got it. She reached out and squeezed Stella's hand. Welcome to the family, Luna. I'm sorry your entry into it was so traumatic. I'm sorry for your loss. Adrian sounded like a good man. He was. He would have been a great alpha someday. Sarah's smile was watery, but genuine. But now Moonstone has something even rarer. First blood as Luna. You're going to do amazing things for this pack, Stella. I can feel it. I'm going to try. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Bruce formally announced Stella's status as First Blood and Luna to the regional packs, and the responses ranged from awe to suspicion to outright fear. First Blood hadn't walked among common wolves in centuries, and having one suddenly appear and claim Luna status at Moonstone sent shockwaves through the political landscape. But Bruce handled the politics with the skill of an alpha who'd been leading for decades, and Stella stood beside him, demonstrating her power when necessary, and her wisdom when words were needed instead of force. Together, they were formidable, and the other alphas learned quickly that Moonstone Pack was no longer a territory to be challenged or dismissed. Within the pack itself, changes came swiftly. Stella implemented new rules protecting omegas and lower-ranked wolves, established a council that gave everyone a voice in pack decisions, and created a justice system that required evidence and proof before condemnation. She spent her days meeting with pack members, learning their stories, addressing their concerns, and slowly transforming Moonstone from a traditional hierarchy into something more equitable. And through it all, Bruce was beside her, supporting her decisions, backing her authority, and showing the entire pack what it meant to have a mate who was truly your equal. He deferred to her judgment on domestic matters, consulted her on political decisions, and made it clear to everyone that disrespecting Luna meant disrespecting Alpha. The mate bond grew stronger each day, the connection between them deepening until Stella couldn't imagine her life without Bruce in it. He was patient with her lingering wariness, understanding with her occasional nightmares about the execution grounds, and gentle when she needed gentleness. But he was also fierce in his protection of her, possessive in a way that made her wolf purr, and absolutely devoted to proving that he was worthy of the second chance she'd given him. 3 months after the day she'd been dragged to the execution grounds, Stella stood in the gazebo Bruce had built for her and looked out over Moonstone territory. The pack had changed so much in such a short time. Wolves who'd been invisible now had voices. Injustice was addressed swiftly, and the first blood Luna who'd emerged from obscurity had become someone the pack trusted and followed not because they feared her power, but because they respected her wisdom and compassion. Bruce found her there as the sun set, his arms wrapping around her waist from behind, and his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything is now. How close I came to never experiencing any of this." She turned in his arms to face him. "I'm not going to lie and say I've completely forgiven you for what almost happened. Some scars take time to heal." "I know, and I'll keep proving myself for as long as it takes." He kissed her forehead. "But you should also know that I'm grateful. For you, for us, for every day I get to wake up and see you beside me. You make me a better alpha, Stella, a better wolf, a better man. And you make me feel seen, valued, loved in a way I never thought I'd experience." She smiled up at him. "Though you could stand to be a little less overprotective. I don't need 7 guards following me every time I leave the pack house. You're first blood and my mate. You're getting the guards whether you like it or not. Stubborn alpha. Your stubborn alpha. Yes, mine. She kissed him then, pouring 3 months of growing trust and deepening love into the contact. The mate bond flared bright between them, and Stella knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. Not in the kitchens where she'd hidden for years, but here, beside this wolf, leading this pack, being exactly who she was meant to be. The first wolves had answered her call on the execution grounds and given her power beyond measure. But the real gift wasn't the magic or the strength or the ancient bloodline awakening in her veins. The real gift was the second chance, the opportunity to reclaim her life, her dignity, her future. The chance to be seen and valued and loved for exactly who she was. And standing there in the gazebo with Bruce's arms around her and the Moonstone Pack thriving under their joint leadership, Stella finally understood what her grandmother had meant all those years ago. The blood of the first wolves runs deep in our line. When the time comes, when you stand on the bones of our ancestors, the old ones will know their own. They will rise for you, child. They will remember. They had risen. They had remembered. And they had given her everything she needed to become who she was always meant to be. Luna. First blood. Mate. Leader. Finally, after years of being invisible, Stella Blackmore was seen, and she would never be overlooked again. Did you like this story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, tell us which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Shout out to our friends from Milan, New Mexico, London, UK, Xenia, Ohio, Western North Carolina, Massachusetts, Queensland, Australia, Lewis, Scotland, Central Florida, San Jose, California, and more. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!